Uh, hey, it's me. I'm a little rusty on this, but so yeah, I decided that I would come back uh, and I'd do another stream. It's been a bit. I get that. Um, it's yeah. I mean, it has been a while. I've been kind of going through some stuff, and so it just has kind of taken the wind out of my sails. Pardon me here while I get everything kind of going. Sorry. But yeah, so this is kind of a check-in, just to let you know I'm alive and that I'm doing okay. Um, the channel is, certainly on hiatus, but it's not necessarily dead. Um, so, I mean, just to kind of get it out of the way, uh, yeah, I've been going through some serious depression lately, and while I don't normally suffer from depression, um, there's a lot of life events and just the situation with my life that has kind of put me there, which has really sort of just pulled all of the motivation and interest out of my hobbies and my ability to focus on things and get motivated to do things. Um, don't worry. I mean, things are okay. I'm safe and I'm healthy. In other words, I'm not like in danger or anything like that. But you know, there are there are issues with the way life is going in general that have complicated my mental health. Uh, I mean, full transparency, we've lived here in St. Louis for about pushing 3 years now, and have really not managed to get settled into the 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 new place. I mean, the house is we're getting settled into, but we haven't really made connections in the community that much. And so, like my wife, when I say we, I mean my wife and myself, because it's just us. So the kids are all still back in Washington, and they're all grown and everything. So it's my wife and myself, and uh, we haven't made a lot of new friends that are really sort of our people. I mean, we have friends. Don't get me wrong. We've made some friends, but we don't get to see them often. They're also in a different place in their lives. A lot of them have small kids, and they're actually a lot younger than us in a lot of regards. And so, um, haven't really been able to kind of interface with people. And while I have a lot of cool online relationships with folks and connections with folks, and I have certainly the general parasocial relationships that a lot of people have. And no slight to any of them, they're all amazing people. But I mean, real face to face contact and interaction is something I never really thought I needed. But then again, I also had it a lot back in Washington. I mean, I had a game group. I had people that I'd raised my kids alongside of who were friends and family, or friends who were family. And so we don't have that here, and it has caught up. And I was sort of in denial about it, and then my wife and I both kind of really kind of came to each other at the same time and said, it's not working. And of course, she battles with mental health issues already, so that's just complicating things for her, which is putting more strain on me as well, because I have to be there to support her. That's my job. And so, and I have anxiety, and a high degree of social anxiety, as well as serious ADHD. So um, that hurts my motivation to get out and interact with people as well. And on top of that, I have a work schedule that just doesn't really fit that well. One thing I didn't realize when we moved here is that nothing happens on Sundays. In St. Louis, and I guess Missouri in general, Sundays are kind of a no-go day as far as events, like community events and stuff. So we didn't really get a chance to. I haven't really had a chance to do anything out in my community on the weekends, because Sundays are sort of just a not used day. Um, I work Saturdays, and my work schedule is such that I'm off at 7:30 local time. So by the time I get off work, with most places closing around 9ish or so, I don't even really have a lot of time to get off work, get ready to go somewhere and do something. So it's really crunched my social options. And so I am working on things. We are working collectively, my wife and I, to get out there and just put ourselves out there more and just force ourselves to get out, be more, active in our new environment, because it's not sustainable as it is now. But again, I'm okay as well as I can be. I did just get back from visits in Washington for the holidays, and visiting friends and family back there, kind of getting to stomp around the old neighborhoods and see, taking in the trees and the ocean and the mountains and eating the foods that I grew up with and all of that. All good. And, certainly that was good for my mental health. Also really helped seeing that my kids were okay. Because when we left to move here, it was sort of an emergency situation. I would not have moved 2,000 miles across the country to a place where I had very minimal, support and everything, because I wanted to. But we had to move real quick. My kids didn't want to come with me, so knowing that they were okay, my kids plus the bonus kids. And if you're wondering what bonus kid is, it's the kids my kids brought home who ended up living with us because their home lives sucked. So there were 2 kids that we took in that I do very much consider my own kids. So that was a very good trip. We learned a lot on that trip, though, that we'll have to correct in future years because we wasted a lot of time. We were staying way out of the way up by where my kids are, which is about an hour and a half away from anything else that we wanted to do. So just to visit a friend was a 3-hour, 3-4 hour turnaround, depending on where they were. So, but no, so that was good. I came back with a little bit more motivation than I left with, so that's good as well. And dirty history and hobbies, even if there were tractor pulls, that's not my thing. Too noisy, and I have 0 gearhead in me, so there's no appeal there. Accounting DM, Oscar, Saxis, whichever you want to go by. Honestly, I mean, things are not good, but they're at least okay. Doc Flamingo. The reason that I haven't said yes and just jumped on that is I had to make this is the joke I've been making since I've been having this problem, because I've actually been invited to several games and had to say no on multiple occasions, not just with Bears games, because I couldn't come up with characters, and I had to make erectile dysfunction jokes. This never happens to me before. This has never happened to me before, because usually when somebody invites me to a game, I've either already got a character racked up in my brain for what I want to play if I played that, or I can come up with one real quick. But with the state of my brain right now, I don't feel I would be reliable enough in my general mood and motivation to really commit to a game, especially a game like one of Bears games where he tries to keep a certain level of quality, and I don't want to disappoint or end up getting into the game, realizing I can't do it, and then having to back out. I've already done that to him once, twice, 3 times a lady. Well, but no, I just, right now I can't. I mean, I've got a basement full of hobby stuff that I'm not touching. I haven't worked on any projects. And Bear, I mean, you say that, but I have to be okay with it. That's ultimately what happens. I mean, whether or not I'm putting too much on it or not, ultimately that's the thing I have to wrestle with. But no, I have a lot of stuff I want to do. I have a lot of projects that are in the works, and right now, the state of my brain is just getting in the way. Having ADHD and having to deal with the executive dysfunction to begin with, and then having depression kill any motivation I have and cause all the self-doubt that I don't need, has really just backburner any of the games I'm trying to design, um, adventure writing. I'm still running my 5th edition game, though that's kind of hit and miss. And of course, we've been on a long holiday for the, or a long break before the holidays. People are out of town. People are just generally not available. So that's still going. Yeah, I mean, we also had kind of a big to do with before the holidays, where we had to sadly get rid of, surrender a dog that we had taken in, that I really had grown attached to. That was a serious heartbreaker, which probably hit harder than it normally would, because it had salved some of the feelings of loneliness and stuff that I've had since we moved here. But he became unpredictably violent, and we did not have the resources or the time to set him right. So I had to surrender him, which sucks because he was rescued to begin with. But yeah, he's and I did learn, unfortunately, that he had to be put down, which is unfortunate because he was a wonderful dog when he wasn't snapping and going after my face, which only happened a few times, but it was dangerous. He would go from sitting next to me and or on my lap, be my buddy, because he was a small dog, and then he would get really violent. And then he would be back trying to be my buddy again, and it was coming out of nowhere, and it was getting worse. So that sucked. Still have our other dog that we moved here with, and my cat, but it was, yeah, that was kind of a serious blow to my general happiness. And it hurt extra hard because it's the first animal I've ever had to give up on. I grew up on a farm, so I've slaughtered animals, I've raised animals for food, I've put animals down, I've cared for sick animals, I've had to bury animals that were killed by predators. I've even had to deal with a dog getting shot by a neighbor, or a dog getting killed by getting kicked by a horse. I've had to deal with all of that, but I've never had to give up on a pet, and that really hurt. But yeah, it's Dirty Histories and Hobbies. This dog was interesting. So almost as soon as we've known him for a long time before we adopted him. When we first moved here, this little dog, he looked like the cross between some sort of wire hair terrier and a dachshund. Although I'm thinking now, but once we got to know him, we think he might actually be like part husky and part dachshund, which is a weird combo. But his behaviors and his sounds and stuff are very husky. Like, anyways, he would show up just randomly in our neighborhood. He would run around, and then we learned that he was actually owned by some people up the street, and he was actually just on the route that we would normally take our dog for a walk on. And which made it really awkward after we adopted him, because then we would walk him past his old owner's house. But his owners were kind of horrible people. They would let their dog break out of his yard. They did nothing to secure him. And then when he got out and they were contacted, they would say things like, "Oh, I don't chase dogs. He knows where he lives. He'll come back." And he's a little dude, and we live on a busy road. We lived on a major crossroad through town, so all the EMS vehicles, they always race down there. People drive down there way too fast. It's a long, straight road that cuts across the suburbs, so definitely, not a place for a little dog to go run around. But the neighbor girls had befriended him, but they couldn't really keep him, and he ended up sheltering with us for one night because his original owners left him out during a hailstorm, and I wasn't about to have that happen. So brought him in. He was a super cuddly, super friendly guy. Just kind of hung out, and he was the sweetest little dog. And then he just started slipping, and I don't know exactly what happened. Hey, Cody. And so yeah, that again, it hurt extra hard. It hit extra hard because giving up on an animal is not something I do. I mean, I've had to save animals who were having complications during births on the farm. You know, I've been elbow deep in a goat trying to save both the mother and the kid. You know, when I was a teenager. Farm life, right? And it's not something that sits well with me. So, anyways, um, hey, and Mar Hockman, yeah, we had 11 inches fall here ish, and then we had several more inches fall on top of that. That's another thing. I'm learning for the first time how much snow actually sucks in the Pacific Northwest. If we get snow, it doesn't stick around long. Here, we're going on the second week of the same ass snow sitting around, and I had to shovel my driveway and my walk for the first time, and no, I do not like that. And because I'm old and my back doesn't like it, I've never been a very physical person to begin with. Um, I grew up on a farm, and a lot of people come from that back. Like, I grew up with hard work, and I respect it, and I know it. And I'm like, yeah, I grew up with hard work, and I respect and know it, and also realize I don't want to do it. Uh, it's like that was my takeaway. I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I did enjoy my time on the farm in retrospect. When I was a kid, I dreaded it, but I really do think it was good for me. But at the same time, no, I would much rather not do that forever. Well, yes, so does St. Louis, Mar Hockman. We have snowplows, um, but they don't. But they just plow the streets, the main streets, and occasionally, and then they get to the side streets. What they also do is put a giant pile of snow at the end of your driveway that you then have to shovel through so you can get your own vehicle out. And then also, if I want to get mail, I have to actually have my driveway and I have to have a walkway and everything cleared up from the street. So I'm not risking my mail carrier's life who's already out in this shit, anyways. So, yeah, I get that you have plans, and so does this city because they know how to do snow. Pacific Northwest, we don't have snow enough. Let's put it this way: when we would get hit with snow up there, they wouldn't know what to do with it, and we'd often have to call in resources from outside the state to help with clearing the snow because we don't have enough snow plows, at least, especially in Western Washington, to deal with, and sanding trucks and stuff like that to deal with the snow. They don't salt in Washington because of environmental concerns, because of the runoff into the ocean and stuff. So within and the lakes, so they only sand and scrape. So, but anyways, so that's kind of what's been going on with me. It's not that I don't like the. Yeah, I mean, to a degree, Bear, that happens here too. I mean, definitely a reduction in traffic, and also there's just the general quieting effect that snow has. I mean, I like how it just muffles everything, and even you go outside, it's just the neighborhood sounds dead. Not that I like dead, but it's nice that it's how quiet it gets. But no, so you know the reasons for stopping or at least putting the channel on hold are not just a matter of the depression, although that was sort of the final straw. I have a hard time coming up with things to talk about gaming wise because ultimately I'm not that opinionated a person when it comes to gaming. Um, I spend a lot of time working on games and thinking about games, but not in a way that really I feel at least is worthwhile talking about. Like I don't come up. I'm not one of these people who feels the need to deconstruct or critique game systems, and you know, espouse those changes and those modifications to other people and try and convince them that my way of thinking about the game is in some way interesting or better. Yeah, that's the other thing. Funny, Bear, is one thing I did learn around here is people in the Midwest, at least in my experience and my observation, don't interact with their environment as much, and so therefore their tolerances for cold and heat seem to be reduced. Like one benefit of coming from the Pacific Northwest, I think, is because it never gets too cold or too hot. You don't bundle up or strip down, to the bare bones in any one particular direction. You just kind of stay and just deal with it. You might throw on a hoodie, and so you kind of get used to the cold. And so here I am out in the environment, like in my backyard, taking the dog out, and I'm standing there in my short sleeves and my pajama pants and my slippers, and I'm walking people walk around with big puffy coats and their hoods up around their head and stuff, and that's partially because every house here is well heated and air conditioned, because you have to, because the reason that you don't interface with the temperatures around here as much is because here they'll actually kill you. Not really a danger in Washington, at least Western Washington. Eastern Washington, as much as it can get fucked, it's also more like the Midwest. Super cold in the winter and super hot in the summer. So yeah, so I guess, what am I working on? What would I like to be doing? Mentioned I do have, I'm also a miniatures gamer and a board gamer, and so I have a couple of small skirmish level miniatures games that I'm trying to write, and I have adventures. I still have the Elfbait fanzine outlined and articles written for it. I just need to figure out how to tackle the next steps of layout and dealing with illustrations. Although for more of a fanzine, I think I could probably make good use of some stock art, and then also just some hand-drawn illustrations, because it's a fanzine. And part of the appeal of zines, in my opinion, at least, even modern zines, is that homespun feel. As far as, hey IQ, how's it going? Yeah, if you want to know how I'm doing, you'll have to back up into the video and listen to the ramble. I do explain it there. And so, yep. In fact, I was just reminded I actually have my 5th edition game to run today, assuming I have enough players. Although I know that Jen probably is not in the right headspace to play, so I'll be put down one player. I have eternally more and more miniatures that need painting. That's another thing on my table. I'd like to get my basement organized. I mean, you can see how messy it is behind me. But hey, Derek. Yeah. So, I mean, if you have a submission for the zine, that'd be great. Right now, I've got quite a decent page count in a zine format. I didn't do a full 8.5 by 11, kind of a thing. I was trying to do it very much more traditionally zine-like, although it is going to be using modern word processing, so we're not going to do it old school where we type it out and then cut and paste and photocopy everything, because that would be too retro, and I ain't got time for that. Let's see. I have also been thinking, and this is kind of in the category of mental health, getting back into some of the hobbies that I've had in the past that are not specifically gaming related. A lot of my hobbies just sort of dovetailed into hobbying and gaming, and so those kind of took over, because I have a hard time doing things just for the sake of doing them, which I'm learning as time goes by is not the healthiest mindset. There's something to be said for doing things for just the sake of doing them, and just for the art of doing them. So there's some things that I've been wanting to maybe uh, do. I'm looking for like an old artist's table, getting back into drawing more, trying to get back into more refined drawing like I had been for a while. Also, uh, sculpting miniatures again just for fun rather than trying to sculpt them to create a product line. Ultimately, those can still be sold. They're just going to be like one offs here and there instead of like. Problem with trying to sculpt for a miniatures line is usually you're like, okay, well, I'm doing this alien race, and now I have to do 10 different poses for that alien race, or else nobody's going to buy it because they're going to piss and moan about how there's not enough variety of poses. But if you're doing like just character models and stuff, you can get away with kind of just sculpting freely whatever you want and just putting it out there. So I might get back into that because that was really fun, and I've been seeing that might be partially motivated by the fact that I've been seeing a fair bit of my old sculpts on Instagram painted up by people who are very much enjoying them and having a lot of good things to say about them. So that's kind of good and healthy, I think. But also, I got some other weird projects that I've been wanting to do. Like I have a thing for like Norse trolls. I really enjoy them. I've always loved them since I was a kid. And I have this idea in my head for like buying thrift store or clearanced like Santas, like Father Christmases and stuff, and then using the more rustic looking ones, not the ones in the red clothes and stuff. I actually have a collection of those. I used to get one every year for Christmas for my kids, my family. But a lot of them, my favorite ones, are wearing very rustic clothing with very minimal Santa effect. And I always thought that it'd be cool to take those and their outfits and resculpt the new bodies and faces to make Scandinavian troll dolls out of those. I thought that just for display and for the art of it, that seems really cool. Um, so yeah, also I have been taking steps just so everybody knows because yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm just complaining about it. I have been taking steps to try and correct the issues that are causing the depression, at least on my side. I have met through social media contacts some very local gamer folks that I'm still trying to figure out a time and place that I can meet up with them and actually start gaming or just interacting. There's a buddy who lives real close who's now like I found out he's got a craft room and some space there, so we're gonna get together and do some terrain building, some miniature painting. There's another guy who lives like literally I found out like within a long walk's distance from me, and by long walk I say not so long that it's actually a chore. He's not super close, but he's close enough to where like I could walk if I wanted to. He's got an amazing game setup. He's one of those guys who's got a gaming collection that is intimidating. And I say this with all honesty. He you look at his game room and he's got so much stuff. It looks like it's a game store. Hey, Manfred. Yeah, I mean, Doc Flamingo modified doll modification is really cool. I mean, really a big thing right now. My youngest uh, was very much into Monster High when he was younger, and now that he's older, he's getting back into it and really wants to get into the customization of the dolls. Also, as far as Barbies go, this is going to sound kind of funny, but if you look at the collectible ones, there's been some really cool Barbie dolls made in the past. I was looking and I never knew, and not that I could ever afford them, or more so, it's not the kind of money that I'm willing to drop on a doll. But like they had an entire line of like um, pulp style uh, space queens and princesses done in full on like Flash Gordon-y outfits that were just amazing looking. Just because if you're into like the old retro sci-fi, I mean, these were all that and just amazing. I mean, if you look at the themed sets they've done, so yeah, I mean, the troll doll thing. And when I say troll doll, I'm not talking about the fuzzy hair and the stupid like wrinkly faces. I'm doing like thinking more the classic Scandinavian trolls, that you would see in books and stories and stuff. Scraggly hair and little pin eyes and bulbous noses and cow tails and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I intended this video really just to kind of be a check-in. Don't know, if it's anything that anybody was particularly interested in, but I really felt like I'm on the upswing, at least in respect that I'm starting to figure things out and starting to progress. I mean, it's slow progression. My normal hesitation and social issues are always going to be something that I have to get out of the way. Also, being very highly ADHD, it's easy to have plans and then never act on them because there's object permanence issues, there's executive dysfunction issues. So while somebody may be somebody that I want to hang out with, if they're out of sight, they are literally out of mind. And so it's easy to we should get together, turning into 6 months later, we still haven't got together. Because yeah, you want to, but you forget they exist. Let's like my mother's like, why don't you ever call? I'm like, Mom, I literally forget that you exist. And she's like, well, that's horrible. That's mean. I'm your mother. I'm like, it's not something I do on purpose. My brain just doesn't register that you exist anymore because I don't deal with you on a daily basis. So I have to schedule times to call my mom and make a point of it. And so that is, object permanence sucks because that's also why a lot of my miniatures and gaming projects go undone because the executive dysfunction keeps me from getting them started. Then when I do get started with them, I then get hit with imposter syndrome, which makes me stop, or the endorphin rush disappears because I figured them out, but they're not finished. So my brain says, we're done. And then the object permanence issue puts them out of my brain because I'm not looking at them all the time. So what I end up with then is miniatures I bought 2 decades ago that are still in the blister pack because I was super jazzed to get them and paint them and use them, or terrain projects that I started building, figured out the process, and then my brain was satisfied, and so it didn't need to actually finish it. The RPG Dad, it's real. ADHD is real. I actually finally got the referral for psychiatry to go ahead to actually see somebody to see about possibly to get an official diagnosis to figure out exactly what flavor of ADHD anxiety I have, and then potentially look at treatment for that, which is a scary prospect because I'm not exactly sure. And it's funny because my kids were even telling me, they're like, Dad, I don't know if I want you to get treatment. And I'm like, and we both kind of agreed on this. Like, who am I without my ADHD? I have lived with ADHD my entire life. It's really become part and parcel of who I am because I had no choice but to deal with it because I'm from that generation where you were the noisy kid, you were the unclean kid, you were the problem kid, you were the bored kid, you were whatever kid that had problems, but they didn't have a solution or an identification for what was wrong with you. I don't have the hyperactivity part of ADHD. So I never seemed like the hyper kid, but at the same time, I have issues focusing. I have issues starting and continuing with things, and I have an issue staying on task with things, and very frequently want to jump from project to project and thing to thing with seeking that new interest, that new endorphin rush that my brain doesn't produce on its own, and so therefore I have to force it to produce. Funny thing is, I've got my mother in her 70s to finally realize that she also is ADHD, and is probably where my brother and I both got it. He has ADHD to a level that makes me feel like I'm standing still sometimes. I mean, yeah, I'm usually the one who makes people, in their head go, "Shut up, stop talking," and that's how he is with me sometimes. Um, which is kind of funny because like I get it now how people are with me when I meet them. It doesn't help that my social anxieties, one of the manifestations of that is I spew. If I meet you, you're going to know everything there is to know about me in like 15 minutes. Um, yeah, at least all the main points. My wife calls it verbal squid ink because when I meet you, I'm going to put out this big cloud of words, and if you're still there when the cloud clears, then we can be friends. So otherwise, you've taken off and you weren't worth my time anyways. So verbal squid ink. I do share a bear. Yes, absolutely. I have no problem share, which is why, to be honest, I probably avoided therapy for the longest time. I mean, besides having early negative encounters with therapy and therapists, which placed a certain amount of stigma and prejudice in my brain when it comes to therapy. The fact that I am willing to talk about my problems to just about anybody kind of fulfills that, at least in the getting it out there aspect. Of course, it does not fulfill the getting usable, actionable feedback route. So yeah, I mean, it's half the therapy. But so yeah, I definitely do share to the point of oversharing, which is why I have no problem sitting here talking to all of you about what's going on with my life, because ultimately, I have no secrets. Well, I do, but the ones I have are probably not as interesting as my brain thinks they are. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, so not staying in touch. Yep, RPG Dad, you have the ADHD. Yeah, your object permanence is, and here's the other thing, the other issue that ADHDers, it's not an issue, but the other thing that ADHDers have is we still care and we still have affection for connection to those people that we don't communicate with all that often. So when we reconnect with them, for us, it's as if no time had passed. And it's not like it's not like an awkward re-encounter with somebody who's been out of your life for a long time. And that often throws people also, because we're come back, we're like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, I just saw you yesterday." But, for me, yes, it feels that way. But, because of my brain, it's been 2 years since I've talked to you. And, that's a thing. So RPG Dad, for as far as ADHD goes, as far as I understand, and I'm not an expert, so disclaimer. There's not a lot you can do therapy-wise for ADHD. ADHD is more a matter of being aware of behaviors and understanding where they come from, and then taking steps to counter those. And then if you have the desire, the need, or it is severely impacting your life enough, potentially seeking psychiatric diagnosis and treatment, because depending on the medication, it can really help. One of my bonus kids, when she first came to live with us, she was untreated, undiagnosed ADHD. Her mother wasn't doing anything about it, but her mother was cool enough to sign over legal guardianship of her to me and my wife. And so therefore I was able to get her on my really good insurance for work. and we were able to get her in to see somebody, to get diagnosed, and to get treated. And the change in her was night and day. She'd always been very intense and very focused and very driven, but in a very frazzled, haphazard way. Once she was medicated, she was able to focus in a proper, useful way. She has now graduated college. She is actually pursuing her career. She went to school, to culinary school. She wanted to. She's working as a baker right now. Eventually, she wants to open up her own cafe and stuff. She's very much on track, and it was because she was able to get the diagnosis and to get that treatment. So, I'm not a professional, but if you feel it is impacting you in a very serious way, you feel like things could be better, reaching out and getting yourself diagnosed, and knowing exactly what it is, what flavor of neurospicy you have, certainly could be helpful and useful, both for yourself and the people around you. Because what I have learned far too late is that my various issues of neurospiciness affected my children and my wife and my relationships with them. And had I got on top of it earlier, things would have been very different. They still love me. And by all means, Dr. Flamingo, neurospicy is what my family calls it. So, because it's ultimately, those neurodivergent tendencies are what flavor us. So we are very much neurospicy. Whether yours is ghost pepper spicy or just a little chipotle, it's all a matter of the degree of issues you got. But really, when it comes at least to ADHD, I've found that knowing what it is literally half the battle, and knowing that you have it and being able to recognize the patterns and the effects it has on your life, really super helpful in just the day-to-day. Not to mention, once you know it and the people around you, you can explain it to them, they can also help you. Hey, Geek, how's it going? But yeah, so anyways, that is, if you take anything away from today, it's mental health is important. It certainly will sneak up on you if you're not on top of it. Don't isolate yourself. Whether or not you think it is hurting you or not, it probably is. We all engage in different ways, and so certainly your journey and your approach is going to be very individual. Well, I mean, that's good. I mean, it sounds like at least they understand you, which is important. And I feel like the current generation, like my kids who are now adults, so my oldest is senior Gen Z, and my youngest is kind of mid Gen Z. If anything, that is a generation that knows exactly where its brain is. And they are also actively pursuing ways to address their issues. I remember seeing a joke once about like Gen Xers, we have mental health issues and we just completely ignore and deny that we do. Millennials, they're perfectly aware of the issues that they have, but they're doing nothing to fix them and just expect everybody to work around them. Whereas Gen Z is very much aware and very actively pursuing ways to live with, mitigate, and correct those issues that they have. So it's progress. Yeah, well, and the other thing too is that now it's turning out, this is the other thing in the evolution of the understanding. ADHD and autism have like an incredibly high, like insanely high comorbidity rate that basically is starting to suggest that you really don't get one without the other. Both my kids have been diagnosed as autistic as well to one degree or another. And they got it from somewhere. And probably both their parents, because my oldest is technically a stepchild and so doesn't have any of my genes. But yeah. Well, see, Marhawkman, the thing is that you're lucky. A lot of people didn't have understanding parents. But also, I've recently been thinking about a lot of it, especially being Gen X. I think a lot of the ADHD tendencies were mitigated by the lifestyle we had back then. Being outside, running around, and kind of being left to do whatever the hell we wanted to for most of the time, offset a lot of that. If I was done doing something, then I just moved on and did something else because I was left to my own devices to figure out what I was going to do with my time. So Damming Creeks wasn't doing it for me anymore. Well, now it's tree fort time. And if tree fort time wasn't doing it, then it was bike time. And if bikes weren't doing it, then it was catching frogs. And if catching frogs weren't doing it, it was playing in traffic. In addition, in previous generations, this is one thing that hit me the other day. Our general atmosphere and environment was so stimulant heavy. If you figure like all the secondhand smoke, of course, with nicotine being connected to actually ADHD treatment, how many of us lived in environments that were just full of secondhand smoke? Nicotine has been shown to be an effective treatment for ADHD to the point where they're actually researching ways to try and get rid of the negative effects of nicotine so they can actually use it as a prescribed treatment. It's also why a lot of ADHDers are also smokers and drinkers and other things too as well, because anything that helps with that endorphin. But if you think about most of the ADHD treatments are in fact stimulants. We lived in stimulant heavy environments that were also full of stimulus. We Gen Xers and previous generations were out running around. We were doing crazy shit all the time. We were kind of left to our own devices. And so, yes, we probably were probably self-medicating without even knowing it. Yeah, Doc Flamingo, that's exactly it. We did go undiagnosed, or like I was saying earlier, we had people in our lives, often teachers and other professionals, who would just say that we were problematic. I was a lazy kid. I was a messy kid. I was a kid who was uninterested and unattentive in class. It's because I was easily distracted. I also have dyslexia, so that didn't help on the reading front. I also have a small amount of dyscalculia as well. So learning was hard, but also my brain was active in ways that they didn't understand. And so I wasn't focusing because I was bored. Flash forward when I get out of just, public school and get into college where I'm studying things that I'm interested in and I'm there because I want to be. I went from barely graduating high school to ending up with like a 3.8 average in college, which isn't perfect, but it's pretty high for somebody who got out of 8th grade with a 0.84 GPA. So, yeah, PTSD is also a fair thing. A lot of people, I think, especially again going back to Gen X and other generations, a lot of people in general are also carrying around a bunch of undiagnosed, unresolved trauma. And I think a lot of people forget that things like PTSD and trauma don't just come from active combat or dangerous jobs. They also come from, abusive households or uncertain households, even if you weren't directly abused. Well, see, Asperger's is an out-of-date term too, because it's basically just part of the autism spectrum now. So, you know, they've kind of the name has fallen out of favor for other reasons, but yeah. So recognizing your trauma, I mean, a lot of those trauma responses are what makes us empathetic, or uh, the reverse makes us hard and distant and kind of just fuck it, because a lot of times fuck it is all you can manage. So um, and you certainly can call it Asperger's if you want. But yeah, it's just like, like ADHD, and it used to be you had ADD or ADHD. Now it's just all ADHD, just part of, where on the spectrum are you, because they realize it's all the same thing. Well, that's the thing too. Yeah, RPG Dad, ADHDers often score high, and especially on tests that test for gifted ability. But if you're of a particularly older generation, there weren't a lot of options. Like, I constantly tested for the gifted programs, but there weren't any openings in those gifted programs. Or at the time, alternative schools, not the alternative schools that you go to because you've gotten in trouble at all the other schools, and so they just take you to the alternative, but the actual alternative schools for kids who learn differently. When I was a kid, you had to pay out of pocket. There wasn't any sort of voucher program or alternative schooling funding that was available for students who couldn't learn in the conventional sense. So a lot of us went by the wayside. And, like me, like I just said, I only got to go from 8th grade to 9th grade because I went to summer school and had to take a study skills course, because I came out of 8th grade with a 0.84 GPA. Because I just could not be bothered to do anything. So I was just bored and uninterested. I would do stupid shit like do my homework and then not turn it in. And when I got called on it by my parents, why are you not turning in? I'm like, I don't need to be. I would say stupid stuff like, I don't need an affirmation from my teachers. I know this stuff. I proved it. And what I realize now is that was my ADHD at work. The ADHD was saying, you figured it out. We're done now. Because the endorphins were all jazzed about trying to figure out the process. But once you figure out the process, your brain can't be fucked to be interested in it anymore. You have to find new ways to find yourself, keep yourself interested. Yeah, I mean, there's all, physical trauma can also create that. I mean, physical trauma and actually emotional trauma can even give you depression. A lot of people, like, it's, you're either born with it or not, but it's also, you can get depression. Depression is something you can get from things. I am finding that out now. Isolation and loneliness has caused depression. Who knew that this was going to be Eli's mental health stream? But if I can start a dialogue and get you guys thinking, then my work here is done. I can throw my coat over my shoulder and walk down the highway to slow piano music. But yeah, that's the one thing I hate about ADHD. With ADHD and anxiety as a combination too, I will often get woke up in the middle of the night because I'm worrying about some shit that I really don't have any need to be worrying about. Or my brain will be just like, I have an idea. I'm like, that's nice. Let's go back to sleep. My brain's like, no, we need to figure out this idea all the way through. We need to think it all the way through right now. But brain, it's 2 a.m. I should be sleeping. No, now. And then I don't get sleep. Yeah, I remember getting sent to special classes, and like every Thursday, I'd get sent to another to a class where they would do weird little games and stuff with me. Little did I know they were testing me for various issues and things. I was considered at one point. I was considered disturbed. Because we had moved to a new neighborhood, a new area where I didn't fit in, and my mom came in and told them, Of course, he's not socializing because everybody hates him because he doesn't feel, like he's, we're poor living in an upper class area, so he's getting snubbed all the time. He's not a normal little boy. Like, I was an art kid. I was not a sport kid. And so in the 80s, that made me this weird three-headed monster because I was a boy who liked to do not rough and tumble things. Yeah. I still did some of that, but it wasn't like my primary goal. Hey, Grumpy Old Slan and Mage's Musings. You did sneak in and I didn't say hey, but so D&D is good in ways. It is definitely not a substitute for actual therapy. It's great as part of a balanced diet of therapy. In fact, it gets prescribed as therapy. But you have to actually have the rest of the therapy with it for it to really work. If you're using it as your therapy and you're self-medicating with it as your therapy, then it's usually where we end up with a lot of the problems that we often talk about. Let's see. Yeah, and that's the thing. When a subject interests you, you're down the rabbit hole and you're knowing everything about it. No, it's all good. You're certainly not required to participate. Mages, it's all good. It's funny what little bits of joy you take. Evidently, I've hit that point in my age where birds are interesting now. So we have a bird feeder set up in eye shot of my basement here. So while I'm working all day, I can watch the birds go to the feeder, and it's remarkable just how much joy I get because the cardinals have returned and I can identify them. Like, oh, look, there's the old senior Mr. and Mrs. Cardinal, and oh, look, the baby boys are growing up and they're getting their red feathers. And it's like, yeah, I've hit the bird part of becoming old. It's like I can check that box off, for middle age. Yeah, if not for RPGs, I would not have had friends growing up, probably. And that's my wife's like, all you ever do is game. I'm like, that's because gaming is so intrinsically a part of me. When I discovered D&D, I immediately got a group of friends in my neighborhood. And then every time we moved, because I moved a lot growing up, I think I'd never spent more than 3 years in the same school district. And so we moved a lot. Not as much as some people I know, but it was easy to find the gamers where I lived, or to a greater extent, the other nerds too. Like one of my best friends in high school, I walked into art class and he was TAing and he was drawing the Thing from Marvel. And I'm like, hey, you like superheroes? He's like, yeah, I like superheroes. And then I would see him bring in Marvel Superheroes RPG books, and I had learned about that game. So again, the gamers. And that's always been a thing. Even in my adult life, working in call center stuff, I mean, which is generally a nerd centric job, anyways. You find the nerds. And when I started playing 5th edition, for example, a good majority of my gaming group were people or I worked with. Literally, they were my team. They were on my team at work. One of the players was my supervisor. 2 of the other players were co-workers on the team. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is a lifesaver. And although I do find it funny, as you say, there's where you learn to LARP as a human, because studies have shown that people who are gamers are actually much more adaptable in social settings. And actually are more responsive and adaptive to stressful situations. Also, interesting enough. However, I wonder how much of that research took into account the fact that how many people who are into gaming also have ADHD, which ADHDers tend to be really good in stressful situations and very adaptable because that's just how their brains work. They're quick, they shift gears real quick and easy. So, you watch the two turkeys in your neighborhood. So you must have wild turkeys wandering around. Either that or just a couple of really douchebag dudes who just wander around. I don't know. Either way. It's funny you mentioned the squirrels, John. I actually got to see sort of my first major ecological shift here last year. When we first moved here, I was amazed by how many squirrels there were. Like everywhere I would look, I mean, we have squirrels in Washington, but everywhere I would look here, there'd be like 6 squirrels in my field of vision. It was just insane numbers of squirrels. And then this last summer, they were gone. All the squirrels were just gone. I'm like, to the point where I'm like, did the city poison the squirrels? Like, where did all the squirrels go? They're all just gone, right? And then I started researching it, and while it didn't specifically say that it had happened here, evidently there is a pattern everywhere across the world where you have squirrels where they will come into an area and they'll overpopulate, and then they will just disappear. They won't die off, they just relocate. And I was reading it, and evidently in the early history of the United States, there were vast swaths of squirrels rampaging across the countryside from place to place, going from like waves of squirrels migrating as they would consume. And I'm like, I never thought of squirrels as this like ransacking, all-consuming species, but evidently they are. But because of how they adapted to modern human settlements and stuff like that, they will now overpopulate and be able to stay locally for a good long time, but then they just keep building up population, and then they just disappear. So yeah, that was fun because of where I live, and they're not the most environmentally friendly state in the universe. It was very realistic to me that the city might have said, or the state might have said, we got a problem with squirrels, kill them all. I mean, I've got a neighbor who I constantly have to fight off because he wants to poison the plants along the fence line. And I'm like, no, we don't poison Marhockman. I have very few people actually call squirrels tree rats in my experience. I mean, I like squirrels. I think they're cool. But I know people call them tree rats, but it's not a very common thing. But anyways, where they RPG Dad, where they sit in the trees and go mee, mee, and growl at you, or they sit there and chitter at you because they're giving you away. Yeah, I actually walked out the other day, and it was all snowy, of course, around here, and so I heard what I thought was a cat meowing. I'm like, oh man, that poor cat, where is it? It's probably out here freezing, right? And no, it's some squirrel sitting in the tree cussing me out because I'm too close to him. But yeah, so yeah, this neighbor is constantly wanting to poison the plants on my property line. I'm like, no, you're gonna kill the birds. He's like, oh, you got moles, we should poison them. I'm like, no, we're not gonna poison the moles. The moles are just doing what moles do. And I got a dog who hangs out in the backyard, and I got a niece who plays in the backyard. Yeah, no. Yeah, iguanas are called tree chickens because they're good eating. I do not like iguanas. I owned an iguana, and she was 5 feet long from nose to tail. And yeah, that was an ornery beast. The first time I ever went to clean her cage, I opened up the cage and picked her up, and she flipped around, and she grabbed onto my head with her tree climbing claws in my cheeks, in my scalp, and she was hanging off my face, whipping her tail around. It was literally like having a face hugger on me. I'm going around the living room with this iguana stuck to my head, and my family are just dying laughing. I was so pissed, but honestly, I understand the humor of the moment, and you can't just pull the iguana off of me because it's got its tree climbing claws in my scalp and in my cheeks. It would have just taken my face with it. So we had to, and its tail's whipping around, and so iguanas have that whip tail, and so like nobody could get close to the iguana for a second. So finally, they had to rush her and like grab her and then like ease the claws out of my scalp to get the freaking lizard off my head. The kids loved her. They would take her to, they would, in the mornings when we would walk to school, we put the iguana on a harness during the summer and walk the lizard with us. But man, yeah, I hated that thing. So yeah, but I also am probably one of the few human beings who actually knows what it's like to have a face hugger on your face to some extent, without the violation part. But yeah, so. All right. Well, we are at 11:05, and I'm running out of stuff to talk about. Unless any of you have any suggestions in the comments of things you might want to hear me wax on about gaming wise. That's cool that you had nice lizards. Before my wife and I got together, and actually before our oldest was born, like I said, stepchild. So when I met my wife, she had an 8-month old, but she had a ball python that she had ended up having to get rid of. She ended up getting rid of when she got pregnant because she realized the snake could eat the baby, and that would not be a good thing. Her snake was like 6 feet long, something like that. So, and she had it trained to ride up on a staff. So when she would go to conventions, she would walk around with the snake on a staff, and people were like, "Oh, that looks so realistic. How'd you get it to look so realistic?" And then its tongue would go, boop, and they'd be like, "Ah, real snake." So yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to hear me talk about anything, throw out your suggestions, your questions, your comments, or forever hold your peace. I'm in no hurry. I don't have my usual therapy session to go to after stream because right now my therapy is in flux because my company changed our insurance plan. So I have to find out if I get to keep seeing my current therapist. If you ever wanted a reason why the health industry or the health care situation in America needs to be improved on, it's this bullshit. My wife, who has had a great relationship with a therapist and a very helpful relationship with a therapist for about 3 years, is potentially looking at having to lose her therapist because of an insurance change. When I say she's really happy with this therapist is in Washington, and when we went back to Washington on holiday, it was a cool opportunity and important enough for her to schedule an in-person appointment while we're on holiday, just so she could actually take advantage of that. So she may have to lose that therapist because of something as simple as shifting from one company to another. So take that for whatever it's worth. Know a dice maker that has a mold for 20-sided die, 20-sided D10s, the dot or plus in the second range. I don't. However, Dirty Histories and Hobbies, aren't those still available through the old educational seller, the educational dice, Polygon sellers that they originally got the dice from? Because I know the original D20s were not custom made for D&D. They were actually pulled from learning tools. So that might be a thing to look into. I mean, you're super knowledgeable, so I'm assuming you already have looked into that. But I don't know of any off the top of my head because I don't have a huge dice goblin issue, so I don't pay a lot of attention to dice makers. But most dice makers are pretty well entrenched in the decades of standardization of gaming dice that came out after those initial ad hoc adapted dice that the hobby started with. So what you need to do, Dirty History and Hobbies, is talk to the old geek, have him pick up a set and mail them to you. See, caring is sharing. We're working together. I mean, you two are well known enough factors to where I'm sure you can figure it out. So let me real quick. I'm going to pull up my Yes, dice came with crayons. You know, there are still companies that are putting together that are doing the crayon dice sets, which I think is really cool. All right, so pulling up my Elfbait zine, gonna go back to that real quick. Remember, I was talking about I need to have layout. Right now, without layout and things spaced out in the way that they are, I have 19 pages, 18 pages if you don't count the giant open space I left available for the table of contents. I have 18 pages worth of content in a digest zine style format. Into a boxed set. So you're looking to do this as an actual production thing. If that's the case, you might be able to make an arrangement with those providers in the UK where they could actually send you something more of like a bulk style shipment, because they may not ship standardly as far as like just consumer orders, but a lot of companies might make different different decisions if they can ship, or you can try and do some research and find out if they're not the distributor, who is distributing their dice, and contact them. All right, Geek. Yeah, go ahead and get that put together, and I will put it. I know Slan had Grumfield Slan had offered to do some layout, but I know that he's a busy man, so we'll see if that works. But yeah, so Dirty History and Hobbies, if you're looking for them, you said to put into a box set, that's different. We're looking at production numbers. So it may be worth talking to them on a business level rather than a general consumer level, and see if that changes their tune. Because then you're also talking about higher volumes, and it's more worth their while to be willing to ship where they normally wouldn't ship. So, also, and that of course assumes that it's that simple of a matter, because there's also the issue, of course, of just how much it costs to ship anything from the UK. That is becoming astronomically expensive. Shipping anything outside of your home country seems to be really problematic nowadays. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, I mean, more for yourself. That's probably something that John can help you out with, or somebody else who lives over there in the UK, because then they can just mail it to you as a personal package. Also, dice are small enough, you might be able to get the lowest kind of parcel sort of mail service going. I mean, hell, if I knew where to get them, I could ask my friends in Scotland to send some over with the next shipment of miniatures I get from them, because they're the guys. I work with Alternative Armies in Scotland for producing my miniatures. I haven't done any new miniatures, but they keep the production lines going. And also, Gavin there and folks are long enough in the tooth as gamers that they may know where to get some, or already have some because they're old like us. Any other questions game wise? So, well, fill the space here, but with what I have for the Elfbait zine. So articles I have currently, I've got I've got a monster article on different types of snails and slugs as monsters. I've got a system for above level casting that I've written. I've got a article on magic doors. I've got 2 essay style articles written on the use of monsters in your games, basically how to work with player knowledge or character knowledge, and then how to use monsters to establish setting. And then I also put in a version of my birthright system, which was a random table to roll for characters to give them some extra flavor when running old school games. That's the other thing. The Elfbait art magazine is geared more towards old school play, not any one particular system, because they're all sort of interchangeable. Although I have to admit, I was sort of writing it with OSE in mind. I would say, you know, if you're writing an article for a specific system, just make sure that you include that article or that system in the name, or somewhere in the article, because at least they'll know where you're coming from. Yeah, I mean, Etsy would be a good place to look. I don't have an immediate solution for you, but I do know that in June I will be going to Fear the Con here in St. Louis. And last year I met a really cool dice making couple. Did some really cool dice, and I could actually talk to them directly and see if it's something that they have or know how to get, and possibly help you out that way too. But yeah, so I think one thing that the Elfbait zine could really benefit from is like a short adventure with like a map or something. During History and Hobbies, nothing specific. I mean, no particular word count. It's a zine. So if it's a short little 1-page, 2-page article, that's cool. If you want to go on for 3 or 4 pages, all right. If it is so big that it feels like it'll unbalance the issue, I'll just bank it, because right now all I'm doing is issue number 0. This is going to be the sort of just trial one. What my plan is to eventually throw it up on DriveThru with both PDF and print on demand options. Yeah, I mean, I will do what I can to help you out there. I can't imagine I have any wider stretched feelers than somebody like you who's more established in the community, in the gamosphere has. But you never know. Maybe there's some corner that I can noodle around in that you haven't been able to reach. And the thing is too, it is a zine. So as far as what to throw in, it could be an article on it. Particularly, it can be a host of new magic items, new monsters, spells, thoughts and processes, little rules, microsystems that are plug and play for other games that have improved your games or could improve. Will I publish short fantasy, science fiction, or just game supplements? I think it would be fun to have fiction in there. The only thing is like, I want it to be very clear that this is not a paying gig. This is purely a voluntary pick. The only charge I will be putting in when it comes to the DriveThru will be to cover expenses. I'm not doing this for profit. I'm doing this for the love of the hobby and the love of the game and the old style scenes where they really were just trying to cover their costs. So when it comes to any fiction you provide, I won't hold any rights to it. Same thing with any game systems or anything you submit. Literally just doing this in the old, almost APA style, where we're just sharing ideas. And if you want to take those on anywhere in the future, I won't hold any claim to them, because that's just not what it's about. Sorry, I'm getting stimulated by some other window. All right. Yeah. So I mean, it's good to get back on here and talking. I wish I had um, more thoughts to share. Again, I find it very hard to like just talk about gaming in general because I don't. I mean, if we sit down in a conversational situation, then yeah, it's one thing, and that's often why we'll have guests. I'm not having guests on this one. I was kind of on the fence whether or not I would, because really this is just a check-in from me to folks, and I didn't think that it was really the sort of situation that required or would benefit from a guest. Because, I mean, not to sound conceited, but it literally is really more about me and what's going on with me right now. My hope is, however, that I will be able to do Sunday streams again, both as a form of therapy for myself, and I hate to say it, but it's good for me to force myself to do that, even when I feel like I can't, because part of the problem with what goes on in this noggin is the perception of problems or inventing problems and thinking that there will be issues with things that ultimately do not pan out once I get there. My wife used to say this a lot of times. Jen is a very wise woman. That when her and I first got together, I was really hesitant to go hang out with like her old high school friends and stuff like that. And it got to the point where she'd have to look at me. She goes, "You're going because once you get there, you're going to have a great time." And she's right. Not only do I get there and I have a great time, but she usually has to drag me out of there. So I think getting up and forcing myself to stream and to talk with folks, even if I don't have a particularly strong idea or opinion on anything, it's good to get on there, because once the stream starts and we start talking about things and the conversation happens, I feel like I'm probably a better person in big group streams as sort of almost like a moderator, because I don't have a strong opinion on things. And it's not that I don't have an opinion. I just don't have an opinion that I feel is like worth flexing on other people. A lot of people on the internet and on YouTube and stuff like that are very much about, I have opinion and this is the way that, let me beat you over the head with my opinion, like some sort of comical cartoon club. But I don't have that. I mean, I'm very much about play the way you want to play what you want to play, and let other people play what they want to play and leave them alone. So it makes me a very moderate voice in that sense. But yeah. So Nasurian, this is less of a talking gaming. So you'll very much, if you go back and watch the stream, you'll find that it's much more of a check-in, a discussion of mental health and various neurospicy issues, and just sort of a picture into what I'm doing right now to try and get back into the swing of things. Let's see. Yeah, speaking of Claricon, I'm pretty damn sure I'm not going to be able to make it to this one either. One of the things that's happening here in Casa de Arndt is that Jen is still trying to sort out her employment. Currently, she's only seasonally employed with filler work in between. And so that's got us constantly on sort of the financial precipice. So not a lot of money to spend on travel. We only were able to go back to Washington for the holidays because the combined effort between our parents, or her parents, paid for our room for the first week we were there, and the second week we stayed with the kids, and my mother paid for the plane tickets because they wanted us out there. I'm thankful, and that was our Christmas gifts from them, as to spend. Although the hotel room, I gotta say, while I love my in-laws for doing this, way more than we needed. Plus, They put us up in a place up by our kids, which if you don't know anything about Western Washington, there's Birch Bay. It's almost in Canada. And that's about an hour and a half from like the outskirts of Seattle and stuff. So anywhere we wanted to go, we were isolated. Birch Bay is also a resort town. So in the winter, it's not particularly active. I mean, there are places to eat and stuff there. And an amazing microbrew with or a microbrewery with incredible service. So hats off to Beach Cat Brewery, who did a great job. But yeah, they got us a whole ass residential condo, the type of thing that you would have for a timeshare, for the 4 or 5 days we were staying there. I mean, the place had a bathroom bigger than the one in my house, and a fireplace, full kitchen. And I was like, I'm not going to use this kitchen here because I don't want to mess it up. And when I say kitchen, not just the appliances. The drawers were full of baking pans and pots and pans and every utensil I would need. They even had like a spice rack and all of that stuff. Full-size fridge, full-size oven. All of that. Accoutrement that I did not need, and it cost them way more than they had any business spending. And also, ultimately, it was kind of a waste because we were so far out of the way. So next year, we're going to park ourselves more centrally in a more modest digs, and that way we can have people visit us casually and get out around. And also, we won't be reliant on borrowing my kids' cars because I don't know if you've tried to do it lately, but renting a vehicle is astronomically expensive. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that's a long story short. I won't be getting to Claricon anytime soon until we can sort the finances out. But then on top of that, I got to deal with transportation and accommodations, and I don't know anybody locally who goes. So trying to ride share would be tricky. I mean, room sharing is always something that can be arranged on the other end, I'm sure, but getting there is a pain in the ass for me too, because I can't drive there because we only have the one vehicle. I can't leave my wife without a car. So because she works outside the house, while I have the benefit of working from home. I do definitely want to get there someday, but that said, if you want a little con that's fun for a weekend and you're in driving distance of St. Louis, there's in June, there is Fear the Con. It's put on by the Fear the Boot podcast, and it's June 5th through 7th. It's technically a free convention, although if you get in on the Kickstarter, you can come in on Thursday night. They do this big all-you-can-eat kind of wing bar with a musical comedian. He's kind of a nerd convention-style musical comic who comes in, and we all eat and laugh and have fun and kind of get back and reacquaint with each other, and then we have the con proper on Friday and Saturday. They don't do Sunday because nothing happens on Sunday in St. Louis. Cursed Midwesterners. No, my wife would not go. While she is gamer friendly and she is a gamer, she is not gamer enough to go to a full ass gaming convention for a whole weekend. Later, geek. I will see you later. I would get on your streams, except for unfortunately my meetings happen now at work right when your stream is going. So rather than get on there and have to leave in the middle of it or come in late, I have just been foregoing them because I hate to bug out in the middle of a conversation. I hate to show up late to a conversation. So, but yeah, Claricon is on my radar. I know he tried to do the virtual con aspect of it this last year. And if that happens again, I might be able to jump in on that and maybe run a game or something. I know it seems to have gone a little wonkily. Hopefully they'll sort that out. But yeah, so if you have stuff that you would like to submit for Elfbait the Elfbait zine. There is on, let's see, I believe, yes, if you're a member of my Discord, which is not, it's not a private Discord, so if you just actually find the Elfbait Discord, there is actually a section on there for the fanzine itself and a section for article submissions and art submissions. If you're going to submit art, I just ask that it is your art, either art that you have purchased and owned and have the rights to and are willing to share and allow me to use, or that you have done yourself, or at least somebody you know has done it for you and they are okay with you providing it for a magazine, a zine. Again, we're not paying for anything. It's just a line I got to draw in the sand, and I'm only going to be charging as much as it costs to get the zine into print form, and maybe just a little bit. I don't like pay what you want. So I feel like people shortchange themselves, but like $1 or $2 on drive-through just to cover the time, which will then help fuel future issues. Everybody I know who says that probably draws way better than they think. I am not a great artist, but I'm actually worse than I used to be because I don't draw as much as I used to. But yeah, I mean, I'm not amazing by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I could probably pull up something. I mean, I've shared a lot of my art in the past on the Geeks page and stuff, but I could probably pull something up and show you what kind of stuff I draw. Let me see if this will work. Still, I'm having to relearn StreamYards because I haven't done StreamYards in so long. So, hey, that's fun. Let's see. Where is it? Let's see if I can blow this up here. This is the Dire Flumph that I drew ages ago just for shits and giggles. There we go. The Dire Flumph. I took the goofiest creature in D&D and turned it into a horrible monster because you can. So here we have the Dire Flumph. So that is me drawing and taking the time to draw and finish it off. If I had better pens, the blacks would be a little bit more solid. But this was probably drawn at my desk at work in my sketchbook using an office pen. So there's that. Let's see what else I got. Used to do a lot of concept designs for aliens for when I was planning my miniatures. Let me see if I can get this to share right. Where is it? Where is it? Did I lose it? No, it's there. Why is it being dumb? So, there we go. So this dude, it's a space alien race I did. It's funny. Otyughs are interesting. They're one of those monsters that, they're an early D&D monster, and I only learned recently that there is not officially, but very heavily circumstantially a connection between the Otyugh and the Dianaga from Star Wars, because they both came out about the same time, and they both are garbage-dwelling monsters with eye stalks and tentacles. The Neo Otyugh that is released later after the original Otyugh, though, seems to be a attempt to nod or nudge the Otyugh into the Eldritch horror Lovecraftian spectrum, because the the original Odiug is kind of just a monster. The Neo Odiug ends up having like psionic abilities and stuff, which makes it very eldritch. But I thought it was very cool, just kind of the connections there. They're different than Dianagas, though, because Dianagas are swimmy, tentacly creatures, and Odiugs are. The Odiug actually honestly looks like the Dianaga crossed with the Dark Young from Lovecraft. Say what, Daryl? Anyways, so the what was I saying? Sorry, lost my train of thought. No, as far as like art goes, I mean, I do draw, and honestly, I do some fantasy art, and I've actually kind of been trying to figure out how I could squeeze some of my art that I've already done into the magazine just for the sake of filler. But yeah, not all of it's as finished as some of the other pieces I've been showing. Let's see, got another one here. This was very much done with a heavy marker and just kind of on the fly. This is a shambling mound that has been become the host to some sort of fungus in D&D. I think that a shambling mound is a great combo creature to add in things like shriekers or violet fungi or things like that, because they're plant monsters, and so it makes sense that other plants and stuff might take root on them. So it's a way to take those stationary monsters and then turn them into mobile creatures. Whereas a shambling mound is dangerous enough. Imagine it now has a yellow musk vine on it, a yellow musk creeper, and now can transmit the yellow musk zombie thing, or it has say like a shrieker or something, or so it's going to alert the dungeon as it wanders around the swamp or whatever it's in, or maybe it's got violet fungi, or it's got a mold or something on it. So now those creatures that are often stationary are now mobile. Shambling Mounds are actually inspired by Man-Thing. In fact, the original art for the Shambling Mound is almost a one-for-one ripoff of Man-Thing from DC. Yep. Down to having the weird eyes and the carroty, snaggly nose thing going on. That's 100% Man-Thing. But yeah, so our Man-Thing is Marvel. Excuse me. Yeah, he is Marvel's Swamp Thing, basically. I said DC. I was getting confused because Swamp Thing is DC. But yeah, Shambling Man is definitely Man-Thing. I actually very much one thing that I think would be a fun sometimes article or maybe collective article to have in the scene sometime would be to follow in the footsteps of Gygax and crew and their original monsters, where they took cheap plastic toys and created like the Rustmanster. The Rustmanster suddenly went like Bostonian or something. Hey, it's a Rustmanster. But the Rustmonster, the Owlbear, and what was the third one they got out of that? Rustmonster, Owlbear, and anyways, they used the cheap plastic toys that they could find to create some of the iconic monsters that are original to D&D. The Pilette, that was the other one. Also, there's some suggestion that one of the more lizardy looking things, the one that has the pincers on its face, may have been the inspiration for the Umber Hulk, because the Umber Hulk has the little eyes plus the pincers on his face and stuff. But I don't know about that. There's also a striking similarity between some of the other plastic monsters and some of the other creatures that may have come along. But what I thought would be fun would be to take submissions from people who find a plastic monster or old cheap children's toy monster out there, and then write it up as a D&D monster, and then we could include it in the zine. Of course, we might wrestle with IP and rights, but I'm pretty sure that we would fly under all of the radars. That would be a case of find a monster, write it up, take a picture, or find a picture of the monster. I mean, you wouldn't even have to find the monster. Just search for one on the internet and then write it up. I thought it might be fun to take those little rubbery, finger monsters, find a way to write them up for D&D just on their appearance and stuff like that. But, or my buddies and I used to take Muscle Things. Remember the old Muscle Things characters, and we would put them together for various games too. Dragon used to run a lot of really cool articles early on especially when miniatures were still developing in their availability, and a lot of times you had to convert miniature models to get what you wanted to. You might, if you wanted an elf hero, you might have to take a medieval character and no Marhawkman, not like an Elden Ring. There are little rubber monsters that fit on your fingers, and they have jiggly arms and mouths. They're made out of soft rubber. I mean, I remember early on when my friends and I used to go. We had a very weird way of collecting our miniatures. We would collect miniatures as a collective. Each of us had a particular thing that we were really into, and so one guy would be into goblins, one guy would be into dwarves, and I was into elves and woodland creatures. So together we would get this big collection together. But also that's how we started initially wargaming with miniatures before we even really knew what war games were, because from collecting elves and centaurs and fauns and dryads and stuff like that, had a cool Sylvan army, big collection, and my friend would have all of the goblins. We would end up with armies, right, along the classic wargaming sense, where you have a single race army, which is a trope that I really would love to see go away. But that's another discussion. But we would often end up with extras or duplicates and need to make leaders, and so that would often be a quick, hand swap, or just some really cumbersome putty or paint work. You have fundamentals of creature design and principles of creature design to fuel creative drawing with real life biomechanics. Daryl, what are those books, or is that classes you've taken, or what is that exactly? That is actually one reason that I do collect a lot of art of books for various IPs. When I was doing a lot of sci-fi miniature design, I did pick up a lot of Halo and Mass Effect art books because a lot of times you can get inspiration because in the development of the races and the tech from there's things you can mine from. Anything Star Wars is always useful. When I did a lot of my initial sculpting, I was doing a lot of one-off aliens, like I'd mentioned before. Most of them were unarmed because I was doing I wanted to do civilians, because a lot of miniature lines are very human heavy, and they're also very combat oriented. And so I was thinking very Creature Cantina in my head. I was going to do a bunch of one-off sculpts. Occasionally I would do multiples when maybe a figure was easily modifiable. And I was told at the time that I had a very Jim Henson style to a lot of my creatures, which is totally understandable, because a lot of my inspiration comes from Jim Henson's work with the Dark Crystal and the Storyteller and Farscape and stuff like that. In fact, I even cribbed the Xiang from Farscape to make a race in miniature called the Prang, and So yeah, big giant frog dudes. Wayne Barlow's books are also great. I always loved those as a kid because besides the Darwin 4 one, which was the first time I had ever seen truly alien aliens or alien life forms, I loved the stuff that Barlow did for the literary aliens. Like it's like for the first time you would get a clear painting of the races in some of the science fiction books, because the covers of old science fiction books were often horrible at depicting the aliens that were in them, if they did, because a lot of times the covers were just nonsensical and had very little to do with what was actually in the books, because a lot of times they just almost used stock art or just composited stuff. You were lucky if you actually got an accurate representation or any representation of something from the book on the cover. Like, here's a sci-fi story about spaceships. We're just going to borrow it. We're just going to, pay for the rights to use a Berkey painting. And, it really has nothing to do with specifics of the story, even though I do like Berkey. Finally, with 3D printing, we might actually be able to get Berkey spaceships in miniature, because they're nearly impossible to cast because of the weird shapes they have. But 3D printing could do it. It's just now I have to find somebody crazy enough who wants to actually try and sculpt Berkey ships. But speaking of which, I mentioned earlier, I have various war games I'm trying to design. I'm trying to design a game inspired by Berkey's sci-fi hydrofoils into doing a future that is basically a future combat that never was on a water world. Very retro science fiction. I find a lot of appeal in creating content, creating properties that are based on the futures that we thought were going to happen. Because the future that as is, or as it probably is going to occur, is kind of boring. We used to have a lot of weird ideas about science fiction when, you might have a sun ray or a stasis net, or something to that effect. And those are all fun. Now it's just like, yeah, I've got my Mark 32 plasma gun, or my rail gun, or my, we used to have fun with names. We don't have fun with names anymore. All right, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. I'm going to have to call it quits. I need to go eat something, and actually probably try and do something with my day. Keep the momentum going. Thank you, everybody, for all you guys who showed up. We're at, I think, at highest count, 17, 18 people watching. I know this was not a very gamey stream. I hope to have more of that in the future. If there is a topic you would like me to talk about, go to the Elfbait Discord. If you're not a member, become a member. And then also, there are various topics there where you can, there's a general content there where you can just, you can always ask for things to talk about, for me to talk about, or suggest things. Often, if somebody has a particularly hot take or something on something there, I will talk about it. I also do, when I'm feeling up to it, I should say, write articles and post them there in the various categories. So there's stuff to read there and comment on. And I certainly do appreciate people commenting and feeding back. So if you're not a member of the Discord, it's been there forever. Sign up and participate. That's what it's there for. All right. So anyways, I'm going to call it quits. Have a good one, everybody. And take care. Get out and game. Don't shut yourselves in. People are important. Interact. And be aware and talk about your various stuff you got going on. It helps.